Good evening, I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On the NewsHour tonight, businesses are hit by new tariffs that the United States is slapping on Mexico and Canada in what's become a global trade war.
Canadians are reasonable, and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight.
Ukraine scrambles to salvage its fractured alliance with the U.S. after the White House suspends military aid to the country at war.
And President Trump prepares to give his first address to Congress since returning to office as he slashes the federal workforce and reshapes American foreign policy.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Kathy and Paul Anderson, and Camilla and George Smith.
I absolutely love my job because I love the people I work with. Everyone is trying to connect on a personal level.
We look out for one another. We love to see our teammates thrive.
You don't have to change how you walk. You don't have to change how you talk.
We can bring our authentic selves to work and do our best stuff. That's joy.
The Charles F. Kettering Foundation, working to advance inclusive democracies. Learn more at kettering.org.
The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, fostering informed and engaged communities. More at kf.org.
And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. Ahead of the president's address to Congress tonight, the White House is implementing two new policies with global consequences.
The Trump administration is halting military aid to Ukraine, and it's imposing new tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. That sparked a wider trade war and sent markets plummeting for a second day in a row. We start tonight with the economic fallout. Hours after the new tariffs took effect, a blunt rebuke from America's second largest trading partner.
Even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
Speaking directly to President Trump, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced tariffs on more than $100 billion of U.S. exports in the coming weeks, a quarter of which take effect immediately.
Canadians are reasonable, and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight. Our tariffs will remain in place until the U.S. tariffs are withdrawn.
The new U.S. tariffs in effect today impose a 25% tax on imports from Canada and Mexico and raise duties on Chinese goods to 20%.
There may well be short-term price movements, but in the long term, it's going to be completely different.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick defended the tariffs on CNBC and said they could be lifted later on. He argued today's policy is tied to the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. from China and across the borders with Canada and Mexico.
We need to see material reduction in autopsy deaths from opioid, and that's what the president is talking about. This is not a trade war.
Trudeau said Canada has stepped up its efforts to control fentanyl and that only a tiny fraction of the drug seized at U.S. borders comes from Canada. Meantime, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum pledged retaliatory steps to be announced Sunday.
It is by no means our purpose to start an economic or trade confrontation, which unfortunately and regrettably is the opposite of what we should be doing. That is, integrating our economies more to strengthen our region.
In Beijing, China retaliated with tariffs up to 15% on U.S. farm exports.
The countermeasures China has taken are entirely justified and necessary to safeguard its own rights and interests.
Trade among the U.S., China, Mexico, and Canada totals more than $2.2 trillion across a wide swath of goods. For example, the U.S. imports cell phones, computers, and other electronics from China, lumber from Canada, and much of its produce from Mexico. More than 20% of the cars, SUVs, and pickup trucks Americans buy come from Canada and Mexico. Markets tanked again today as a number of business groups and retailers warn the pain of a trade war is about to hit.
If there's a 25% tariff, those prices will go up.
Target CEO Brian Cornell told CNBC that his company imports much of its winter produce from Mexico.
Those are categories where we'll try to protect pricing, but the consumer will likely see price increases over the next couple of days.
And the impact isn't limited to consumers. President Trump's tariffs had Wall Street spooked for a second straight day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 670 points on the day. The NASDAQ ended 65 points lower after flirting with correction territory earlier in the day. The S&P 500 also ended lower and has now erased all its gains after Mr. Trump's election. Soon after the markets closed, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick told Fox Business that President Trump may offer some kind of relief to Canada and Mexico from part of the tariffs tomorrow, but he offered no details. For the moment, those tariffs are in full effect, and we spoke earlier about the consequences with Robin Farzad, economic analyst and host of Public Radio's Full Disclosure. Robin, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Jeff.
So we've got the makings of a potentially devastating trade war. China and Canada will impose their own tariffs on billions of dollars worth of U.S. goods. In response to President Trump's tariffs, Mexico plans to announce new levies soon. Lots of uncertainty being wrought by all of this. What stands out to you?
We're living in the essay section of an AP history exam in what, year 2050? I mean, that's the thing. It's like you can learn from history, and we were only so analogous to the last time the United States slapped the world with so many tariffs, kind of, and caused a full-throated trade war the way we're seeing right now. But I'm still saying that there's a wait-and-see approach. Certainly the first thing to react, markets. We saw the bond market price in more likelihood of recession. We saw the stock market.
Yet none believed the calm would last.
Tactics Ogre. I'll kill you by my own hands, Denim. I swear it!
There is blood on my hands. How long till it lies on my heart?
Three weeks had passed since the massacre at Balmamusa. Consumed with revenge, the Wallister took to the battlefield, wresting large swaths of territory from Galgastani control. The Duke's gambit was a success. Yet not all went as the Duke had intended. Though the atrocity galvanized the Wallister, those in the Galgastani camp who opposed their own Hierophant Balbatos did not rise to action. Worse, whispers of the truth behind what happened had begun to spread throughout Galgastan on the lips of Vice and his men. Where the Duke had sought to sow discord, a new sense of unity now grew among the Galgastani people. But the stalemate of forces along the Sonji Weald showed no signs of yielding clear victory to either side. Hoping to strike a decisive blow, the Duke pushed towards Balbatos' stronghold at Kuritanai, a daring, some said reckless, attempt to take the keep. Meanwhile, Denim arrived at the ruins of Balmamusa, with orders to harry the enemy's flank.
I hear no alarm, sister. I think we made it.
By the look of things, the Galgastani can't have stationed many men here. The fewer we must kill to be done with this business, the better.
You would have me fight such a battle with our numbers. Are you gone mad?
I mislike your tone.
Forgive me, Your Grace. We are more powerful now than ever, I grant you. But let us not forget, we failed to rouse the Galgastani against Balbatos. Our resistance remains far outmatched.
I do not need you to tell me what I know so well.
Then I beg you to reconsider.
Humor your Duke. Hear my plan before you reject it, First, we dispatch a light force to secure Balmamusa, a small town southwest of Kuritanai. Thence to advance to the Zaod Moors.
You distract them by needling their flank? They will never fall for such a ruse.
Your ears would serve me better than your tongue. I mean to have our young hero lead the band. We will feed sweet lies to their whisperers, that it's no small band, but half our army that marches. A morsel they will find impossible to resist. Nor will they know whether it is from Almorica or Balmamusa that we strike.
And they will believe this tale.
The presence of the hero of Goliath will convince them. Balbatos would not think we place our hero at the head of so few. This will be enough to give Balbatos pause. But he is no fool. He will not commit the entirety of his forces to Balmamusa. No, he will divide his men between the Sonji Weald and the Zaod Moors. The martial advantage is his. Even with his forces split, he will not fear defeat. Yet only this way will we have a true chance at victory.
Perhaps. But if Balbatos does not split his troops, what then?
We must see that he does. There's more. Once our heroes have a foothold in Balmamusa, they will turn their attentions to the port of Ashton to the west. Balbatos will fear an assault, and with his troops mustering in Koritanai, Ashton will be ripe for the taking.
Of course. Without Balmamusa or Ashton, they'll be cut off from the sea.
Is that so great a blow?
In Valeria, the sea is life. Without the bounty of her trade, we wither and die. Doubly so the Galgastani and their landlocked keep at Koritanai. Believe our rumors or no, they must respond. And that means splitting their troops.
Should the gambit fail, we still weaken them by closing their ports.
What becomes of us?
If you sense disadvantage, withdraw swiftly.
So in the end, we still must fight a battle of Galgastan's choosing.
Oh, you fret like an old maid, Leonard. The plan is perfect.
As you say, Your Grace.
Forward! Leave no Galgastani standing! Sayard Moors are within our grasp. Onward!
Good evening. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On the news to the News Hour. Ahead of the president's address to Congress tonight, the White House is implementing 2 new policies with global consequences.
The Trump administration is halting military aid to Ukraine, and it's imposing new tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. That sparked a wider trade war and sent markets plummeting for a second day in a row. We start tonight with the economic fallout. Hours after the new tariffs took effect, a blunt rebuke from America's second largest trading partner.
Even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
Speaking directly to President Trump, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced tariffs on more than $100 billion of U.S. exports in the coming weeks, a quarter of which take effect immediately.
Canadians are reasonable, and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight. Our tariffs will remain in place until the U.S. tariffs are withdrawn.
The new U.S. tariffs in effect today impose a 25% tax on imports from Canada and Mexico and raise duties on Chinese goods to 20%.
There may well be short-term price movements, but in the long term, it's going to be completely different.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick defended the tariffs on CNBC and said they could be lifted later on. He argued today's policy is tied to the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. from China and across the borders with Canada and Mexico.
We need to see material reduction in autopsy deaths from opioid, and that's what the president is talking about. This is not a trade war.
Trudeau said Canada has stepped up its efforts to control fentanyl and that only a tiny fraction of the drug seized at U.S. borders comes from Canada. Meantime, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum pledged retaliatory steps to be announced Sunday.
It is by no means our purpose to start an economic or trade confrontation, which unfortunately and regrettably is the opposite of what we should be doing. That is, integrating our economies more to strengthen our region.
In Beijing, China retaliated with tariffs up to 15% on U.S. farm exports.
The countermeasures China has taken are entirely justified and necessary to safeguard its own rights and interests.
Trade among the U.S., China, Mexico, and Canada totals more than $2.2 trillion across a wide swath of goods. For example, the U.S. imports cell phones, computers, and other electronics from China, lumber from Canada, and much of its produce from Mexico. More than 20% of the cars, SUVs, and pickup trucks Americans buy come from Canada and Mexico. Markets tanked again today as a number of business groups and retailers warn the pain of a trade war is about to hit.
If there's a 25% tariff, those prices will go up.
Target CEO Brian Cornell told CNBC that his company imports much of its winter produce from Mexico.
Those are categories where we'll try to protect pricing, but the consumer will likely see price increases over the next couple of days.
And the impact isn't limited to consumers. President Trump's tariffs had Wall Street spooked for a second straight day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 670 points on the day. The Nasdaq ended 65 points lower after flirting with correction territory earlier in the day. The S&P 500 also ended lower and has now erased all its gains after Mr. Trump's election. Soon after the market.
sure. At your service. We will.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz.
It has also been a dramatic day for the administration's policy on Ukraine. President Zelensky today expressed regret for how his Oval Office meeting with President Trump melted down on Friday, and he echoed President Trump's language about hoping to end the war and signed an economic deal.
But Zelensky made that statement after the Trump administration paused all military aid that's helped the country survive Russia's full-scale invasion. Here's Nick Schifrin with more.
In Kyiv tonight, a mea culpa.
We can only regret what happened at the White House instead of our negotiations, but we must find the strength to move forward, to respect one another.
You're buried there, your people are dying.
Since Friday, U.S. officials have been wanting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to apologize and indicate a willingness to cease fire, which he did for the first time today on X. He wrote the first stages could be the release of prisoners and truce in the sky, a ban on missiles, long-range drones, bombs on energy and other civilian infrastructure, and truce in the sea immediately if Russia will do the same. Zelensky also pledged to sign an economic deal that would pay half of all revenue from Ukraine's critical minerals, including this titanium mine, to an investment fund jointly owned with the U.S. It would upend decades of U.S. precedent, forcing the invaded, not the invader, to pay up. But it would also mean the U.S. was invested literally in Ukraine's future, as the two presidents celebrated before Friday's meeting blew up.
It's a big commitment from the United States, and we appreciate working with you very much. Armata!
But the deal does not come with security guarantees, and Ukraine argues only a strong defense can end the fighting long term. Since Russia's full-scale invasion, the U.S. has appropriated more than $180 billion to Ukraine, $66 billion in military aid. Today, the U.S. is responsible for 20% of Ukraine's military supplies, perhaps most critically, air defense, including the Patriot missile system. A senior Ukrainian official argues Ukraine can survive without most American weapons, in part because Ukraine has mastered modern war's most important weapon, drones.
This is not 2022 anymore. Our resilience is stronger now. We have the means to defend ourselves.
But still, the U.S. decision has left Ukraine's defenders offended.
At first, the U.S. were with us. Now they don't even want to recognize Russia as an aggressor. In fact, the U.S. has changed sides.
Echoing that soldier, a senior Ukrainian official told me that after the White House confirmed the pause of U.S. military assistance last night, Ukraine felt betrayed. This official said, quote, "In the war between Ukraine and Russia, the first surrender was the United States." But he and other Ukrainian officials I spoke to tonight said they hope President Zelensky's message could lead to the economic deal being signed, and they expressed gratitude for their cooperation with the Trump administration. Amna?
Thank you, Nick. For more on this now, we turn to retired Lieutenant General Doug Lute. He served in both the George W. Bush and Obama administrations on the National Security Council staff and was U.S. Ambassador to NATO during the Obama administration. General Lute, welcome back to the NewsHour. Always great to see you. You've heard now the White House says that the freeze on military aid to Ukraine stays in place until President Trump determines Ukraine has demonstrated a commitment to peace negotiations. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think Nick covered the immediate impacts pretty well in his reporting. We should remember, first of all, that this is not the only time that aid from the U.S. has been paused or suspended. Remember, we went through a 6-month period last year where there was a cease in aid because of congressional debate and so forth. The immediate impact will be on high-end air and missile defense systems that protect Ukrainian cities. And as Nick reported, the Patriot missile system is probably first and foremost there. But also there's very sensitive intelligence sharing that's been going on, and intelligence gathered from very sensitive collection sources. So it'll be interesting to see if that sharing also ends. There are 3 things that will somewhat moderate or mitigate the impact of this U.S. pause. First of all, Ukraine has ramped up its own indigenous defense industrial base. They produced a million drones on their own last year, and drones now dominate the battlefield. The Europeans can cover some of this gap as the U.S. departs. And then finally, it very much depends on the battlefield dynamic. Does the tempo of the war remain the same, or is there hope for a ceasefire, which would mean that the gap is less significant?
General Lute, is the U.S. asking enough of Russia in all of this to get them at the negotiating table?
I think this is one of the curious dimensions of the Trump approach, which seems to be removing leverage from Russia and pressuring Ukraine. You saw just a couple weeks ago that the defense secretary announced 3 no's with regard to leverage on Russia. So no U.S. troops as a part of a ceasefire enforcement arrangement. No return of Ukrainian occupied territory, sovereign territory, and no hope that Ukraine will join NATO. That's curious because typically in the pre-negotiation phase, the sides try to gather leverage, to assemble leverage, rather than sacrifice it.
We've also heard these repeated demands from U.S. officials of gratitude, more gratitude from President Zelensky. It came up in the White House meeting. It's come up since then. What do you make of that? Is that a productive tack to take with an ally?
Well, perhaps it would be if it were true, but it's simply not true. I mean, I don't know of a single public engagement with Americans or with European allies or with the United Nations where President Zelensky has not started with making the point, begun his engagement with gratitude and thanks. So I just don't think it's accurate.
President Zelensky seems to want in these talks security guarantees up front first, and then to talk about negotiations and a ceasefire. President Trump and his team want to talk about the ceasefire first for a war that's now in its third year. What's wrong with that approach?
Well, President Trump has said security is the easy part. Getting to the negotiations, he implies, getting to the negotiations is the hard part, which he's working on now. That's simply not Zelensky's and the Ukrainians' experience over the last 11 years. They have 11 years of experience of numerous signed agreements between Ukraine and Russia, which have repeatedly been violated, and yet their country has no security. So it's quite, I think, understandable that Zelensky requires something more credible to guarantee his security before he launches into ceasefires.
In the minute or so we have left, do you see this moving into negotiations? And if so, who has the leverage going in?
Well, leverage is a big thing now. And as we've already discussed, I think we've unnecessarily sacrificed some of our leverage up front. I found Zelensky's statement today as very interesting. He offered some good ideas, what would in typical terms be called confidence building measures. So the exchange of prisoners, a ceasefire, long-range strikes on both sides, a ceasefire at sea. So if these sorts of introductory measures, beginning measures can be set in place, then maybe we can build some momentum towards talks.
Retired Lieutenant General Doug Lute. General Lute, thank you for your time. Always good to speak with you. We start the day's other headlines with a massive storm system that's rumbling across much of the country, stretching from Chicago all the way down to the Gulf.
This is what we're seeing. Oh, holy.
The most severe thunderstorms are carving a path across the South tonight, leaving toppled buildings, debris, and more than 400,000 people without power from Texas to Mississippi. The weather system hasn't brought just rain. It's also kicked up blinding dust storms across parts of the Southwest. And it's threatening to put a damper on Mardi Gras festivities in New Orleans tonight. Officials moved up and shortened the city's two biggest parades, hoping to wrap things up before high winds move in. Turning overseas, Arab leaders from across the Middle East endorsed a plan today to rebuild the Gaza Strip. The measure would allow the territory's 2 million Palestinians to remain in Gaza. It's a counter-proposal to President Trump's vision, which calls for removing Palestinians from the area and creating a beach destination. Experts warn such a plan would be a war crime under international law. At today's summit in Cairo, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi laid out his $53 billion plan, under which Hamas would cede power to an interim independent administration.
The plan starts with immediate relief operations and early recovery efforts, leading to the full reconstruction of the enclave. Egypt calls for adopting this plan at our summit today and mobilizing regional and international support for it.
The president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, was also there. He told the summit he's ready to hold elections as early as next year if, quote, conditions allow. The Palestinians have not held presidential elections in some 2 decades.